Hello book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Neckhead's Bookish Cafe. Today I'm here to give you my top books of 2025. Alright guys, this is always an exciting video to film, yet also a little bit intimidating because it is always difficult to really be able to properly verbalize why I love these books so much and why you should love them as well. I am not someone who really pre-plans what I'm gonna say. I just kind of word vomit at you. So fingers crossed my brain is gonna cooperate with me today and actually articulate what I'm feeling so that you want to pick these up too, because these are the best books that I've read this year. I have 9 top books of the year, and then I have 4 honorable mentions. Those might seem like really random numbers. You're like, why are you not doing a top 10? Can't you take one of the honorable mentions and put it into the one of the top 10? It just doesn't feel right. Okay, essentially the way that I did this is I scrolled through all the books that I read this year, and whichever ones really stood out to me as being good and memorable, those are the ones that I picked out. I didn't go into this with a specific number in mind that I was trying to find. 9 were the books that I was like, yes, for sure, these are top books of the year. And then I had an additional 4 that I was kind of like going back and forth on, so I decided to make those honorable mentions. I will say when it comes to the honorable mentions, they're not really in a particular order. However, with the top 9, I did try to order them. I would say the only ones that I'm really solidly confident about are the top 3 though. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the first honorable mention. All right, starting off with a series that I have been plowing my way through this year in a way that I have not plowed through any series. Unfortunately, despite the fact that I should be plowing through series, it's gonna be Veronica Speedwell by Diana Raybourn. I ended up reading 6 books in this series, catching me up on it, and that means I read book 4 through book 9, and I don't think any of these actually got a 5-star, but a lot of 4 stars and 4.5 stars for this series. And just because I was reading it so much and enjoying it so much, I knew that I had to go ahead and shout it out in this video. I am someone who is struggling with audiobooks this year. There were a couple years where I was reading audiobooks all the time, and recently, or not recently, but in the last year or so, I have started to really struggle to pick them up. It is not my preferred way of reading a book, and my brain has been very opposed to the idea of me picking up audiobooks. However, this series is one of the exceptions. I absolutely love listening to these as audiobooks. I think the narrator does an excellent job. So if you're thinking about picking up this series and you're someone who does occasionally pick up audiobooks, then I highly recommend picking it up this way. This is a historical mystery series. It's kind of the series that got me going like, hey, I might not really like historical books or mystery books, but put them together and it kind of works for me. I think for me, what really draws me to the story though is the characters. We are following Veronica, who is a very strong, independent, modern woman considering the time period. She's very intelligent and stubborn and outspoken. She's got a great sense of humor and she loves very deeply. We are also following Stoker, and he is her love interest and eventual beau, and he is a man who has a bit of a rough past, but he is fully dedicated to Veronica and her shenanigans. He is the kind of man that you want by your side. I honestly have nothing bad to say about this man. He is also a natural scientist, incredibly intelligent, very strong, very driven. He also has a bit of a dry, darker sense of humor that I quite enjoy and works really well with Veronica. The two of them are just really really great partners when it comes to solving crime, as well as like romantically. So they are working together in multiple capacities of their life, and they are just such a joy to watch. On top of that, I really enjoy the side characters. We have met a ton of interesting characters throughout this series, some of them showing up more and more throughout the series, and I am just eager to see where the story goes next. Next of my honorable mentions is gonna be a book by an author I discovered this year, and I ended up reading 3 different books by them and quite enjoyed all 3 of them, but this one was my favorite, and that is gonna be Blood and Flowers by Mars Adler. And these are all on the shorter side. I believe this one might have been the longest out of the 3 that I read, so it's no surprise that I liked it the best. I am not as big of a fan of shorter stories, but all of their books are along the horror erotica side, and this one is a haunted house and features vampires. Their books also often have trans characters, and in this book we are following a trans man named Elio, and he is the son of a very prominent vampire figure, and his vampire family has actually been at odds with another vampire family, but the 2 of them have kind of teamed up in hopes of addressing the issue of this haunted house. And Elio has been working with curses and spells. He is a bit of a mage of sorts. Magic is kind of his specialty, and he ends up working with the son of the leader of this other vampire clan named Valerian. And the haunted house is actually the home of Valerian's family, and Valerian was actually the one who put up the curse in this house. However, this curse has kind of grown out of control, and so it is up to the 2 of them to go in there and kind of resolve this curse and everything else that has run amok in this home. I would say, despite being someone who isn't overly familiar with haunted house books, this is one of the best haunted house books that I've read in a while. It gave me exactly what I wanted. It had the classic haunted house tropes of lots of portraits that eyes seem to be following you, the hallways that just stretch on, doorways that lead to rooms that they shouldn't be leading to, and then there's something in the house that seems to be watching you at all times. It has the perfect haunted house vibes. Add on to that some sexy enemies to lovers, vampires who are having to work together, but there's something in the house that is just causing the 2 of them to be very aware of each other. So like I said, this is a bit of a more erotic story. While there's not a ton of smut in it, there's always this underlining sensual vibe to it that I feel just works perfectly for a vampire story. This, I believe, is going to be a series, so if you're looking for true enemies to lovers, even by the end of this book, they are just starting to reluctantly admit their feelings to each other, so it really is a true enemies to lovers book. I absolutely adore this author's writing. I think that their writing is perfect for these kind of spooky erotic stories that they're writing, and I always enjoy the queer and trans representation that is present. And the third of the 4 honorable mentions is gonna be a middle grade book, and that is gonna be Heroes of the Water Monster by Brian Young. This is actually the sequel to Healer of the Water Monster, which is a book that made me cry, and this one made me cry as well. I don't know what it is about middle grade books, but they tend to pack an emotional punch, and this one is no different. This is a book written by an Indigenous author and features Indigenous characters as well as Indigenous mythology, specifically revolving around the water monsters who are guardians of specific bodies of water. At the end of the first book, our character Nathan has found himself with a baby water monster, and it is up to him to go ahead and raise this little baby water monster. However, he is getting to an age where it is getting more difficult for him to see the baby water monster. Once people start growing older and older, a lot of the spirits are no longer visible to them. However, Nathan and his mother, I believe it is, end up up moving in with Edward and his father because their parents are dating, and Edward is younger, and so Nathan sets out to train him to raise this baby water monster. Edward obviously has no experience with this because he wasn't part of the first book, so he doesn't know anything about spirits or baby water monsters, and they end up seeking the help of an older water monster who has been living in the spirit realm so that she can help raise her young sibling. Unfortunately, this water monster has not been to the human realm for a long time, and when she arrives and sees the state of her river as well as the rivers of a lot of other people, seeing how humans have contaminated them and redirected them and caused droughts, she becomes incredibly depressed and filled with rage and a need for revenge for what has been done to her siblings, because as the rivers die, her siblings die as well. This is obviously a story that focuses heavily on environmental damage done by the human race. I think it's done in a way that allows a younger audience to really understand the harm that is being done by humans who are not respecting the water and very much taking it for granted. I think that the story focuses on a lot of really important issues. We are following Edward, who is half white, half indigenous, and he's really struggling with the fact that this water monster shows so much hatred towards the white man because of what they have done. And obviously he, as someone who is half white, is very uncomfortable with this blatant hatred to half of his family, but at the same time he's also acknowledging that what they did is wrong. And on top of all of the myth and the environmental commentary, we also just have these two young boys who have been living as single children with their single parents and just having to form this new family and see if they can become brothers. So this book has a lot of great stuff going on. I think it's great for any age, but of course if you have a young person in your life, especially someone who is really interested in environmental issues, then this might be a book worth picking up for them. The final book of my 4 honorable mentions. With this book, I really need to remind myself that I'm trying to keep it relatively short and sweet here so this video doesn't get too long. I did just talk about this book in my December wrap up and went relatively in depth. So if you want to hear more of my thoughts on it, please consider checking that video out. And that is going to be One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This by Amar Akkad. This is a non-fiction book. It is a non-fiction book that has been going around and receiving a lot of praise and is well deserving of this praise. We are following a reporter as he is discussing his response as well as other people's response to some very horrific events that have occurred throughout his career, primarily focusing obviously on the genocide that is occurring in Gaza right now. He is someone who has gone through a lot of personal growth throughout this experience, and he really looks at this topic from the perspective of both a father of a young child living in this world as well as an immigrant to the US. And it's a very interesting and moving perspective to view this issue from. I think that he is someone who really tells it how it is. He doesn't really hold back with the horrors of what is occurring. This definitely is an emotional punch of a book, but he's also not going to hold back and let you tell you that, well, what you're doing is enough. He's going to really call out those people who are trying to keep their distance from this issue and are trying to kind of wait on the sidelines to see which team wins and what their opinion on it should be instead of standing up and forming their own opinions. So I absolutely adored this book. I think that he has excellent writing, though sometimes I feel like he got a little bit lost in the sauce, I guess you could say, and that's the one reason it's kind of an honorable mention and not one of my top books of the year. But that being said, if you are at all interested in kind of viewing what is the social response to the genocide in Gaza and kind of the issues with the response that people are having, then this is definitely a book that's worth checking out. All right, guys, now let's get into the top 9 books of the year. Again, I try to put these in order, but like I said, only the top 3 I would say are really solidified in their spot. So let's go ahead and start with book number 9, and that is going to be The Nightmare Before Christmas by Sarah Rush. I just read this here in December. It is a relatively Christmassy book, though I think you could probably read it at any time of year, and this is a fantasy romance. In this world, each of the holidays are kind of ruled by a family, and our main character Nicholas is the heir of Christmas, one of the most powerful holidays. And at the beginning of this book, he is kind of blindsided by the fact that his father and the King of Easter have decided that Nicholas and his best friend, the Princess of Easter, are gonna get married. And while the two of them love each other very much, it's a platonic kind of love. They are really not that interested in getting married. However, they decide that it's what's best for their family, specifically Easter, which has been struggling a little bit ever since the death of their queen. However, once this announcement is made, Halloween approaches Christmas and says, you are amassing too much power, and by marrying into a powerful spring holiday family, we don't think that it's okay that you're doing this. We find it a little bit suspicious. And Christmas decides that the best way to handle the situation is to say, Halloween, if you want to send your prince to battle essentially for the hand of the Easter princess, you can. And so they send their prince Hex. Now, Hex and Nicholas have actually had an encounter in the past, a very passionate kiss between the two of them. However, Nicholas didn't actually know who Hex was at the time, so he's very much blindsided by this sexy Halloween prince showing up and trying to win the hand of the princess when Nicholas wants him to win his hand because he's already won his heart. And I absolutely adored this book so much. It was an easy 5-star. I am someone who loves a romance that has a lot of emotional depth to it, that has a lot going on outside of the romance. I get a little bored when the primary focus of a romance is the romance. Does that make sense? There needs to be something else that is going on, and I think that this book was really good at balancing multiple aspects of the story. We were dealing with a lot of personal growth. We were dealing with a lot of growth within multiple relationships. Our character obviously was growing closer to Hex romantically, but he was also looking to become a better friend to the Easter princess, as well as become a better brother to his younger brother. And he was also struggling a little bit with his relationship with his father, and he was dealing a lot with the expectations that were put on him as the future heir of Christmas as well. On top of that, we also have a little bit of a political aspect to the story, with obviously Christmas accumulating a lot of power compared to other holidays, and if they really should have this monopoly on joy, because joy is kind of what holidays are collecting, and the more joy a holiday collects, the more powerful they are. And Christmas is one of those holidays that accumulates a lot of joy, but our character is starting to learn a little bit more about how it's doing it, and he's not really comfortable with how Christmas is running and wants to bring about some change. On top of that, the romance was very unproblematic, which I really really liked. It was a very sweet and sexy romance. I absolutely adored the smut scenes. I always say that it was a very romantic smut scene, very tasteful. And honestly, I was like swooning during it because I was like, oh my god, you're writing it so beautifully, oh my gosh. On top of that, the two of them definitely had a lot of communication because they are both heirs to their respective holidays, so they have a lot of responsibility that they have to navigate on top of their growing feelings. And I love me some good communication within this story. I just think that the emotional depth and the amount of time that the author spent in building the characters as individuals, both the main characters and the side characters, are all signs of a really well written romance, and I will definitely be reading this author again. She really caught my attention with this book, and I am excited to see what else she does. Book number 8 is actually a book that I read via KU, and I have yet to get a physical copy of it. I really do, because it's one of my top books of the year, another romance, and this is going to be Patience by Lark Taylor. This is a paranormal kind of fantasy adjacent romance story. It is a male as well, and in this book we are following Ferry, as in Ferry. He is also known as like the Grim Reaper. He is the ferryman of the underworld who takes spirits to what is essentially hell, and he holds this job as a punishment for siding with Lucifer when there was a war between God and Lucifer. The reason he sided with Lucifer is because Ferry found a human mate, and the angels and God did not allow for there to be romantic relationships between the angels and humans, and Ferry was hoping that if Lucifer won, he would be able to stay with his mate. Unfortunately, during the war, they obviously lose, and Ferry's mate actually ends up dying. However, another angel ends up making a deal with him that his partner, his mate, will go ahead and just keep reincarnating, live life after life, not knowing who Ferry is. But once this angel that is allowing for the reincarnation to happen ends up dying in battle, the two of them would be able to reunite. It has been hundreds, if not thousands of years that Ferry has been living as the ferryman, and there is a battle that occurs that ends up killing this angel, and because she has died, Ferry is now free from being the ferryman and going and meeting his mate for the first time. Now he is meeting his mate in modern day, and for some reason this time his mate Leo thinks that he is straight, which throws a little extra obstacles into Ferry's path, but he is determined to make Leo fall in love with him again so that they can continue to live their life together in peace. And this book might seem like a pretty basic done before concept, but there is something about this character Ferry that I just adored. This book is called Patience, and it's not just because this guy waited hundreds of thousands of years to have the chance to reunite with his love. It is because he understands that this is all very new to his partner, that his partner does not remember his past lives, that he is not someone who's come to terms with his sexuality yet, and so he is being incredibly patient, a very good friend and companion, and once they do develop an actual relationship, a very patient lover who is very much respecting the boundaries of his partner, which is something that I just absolutely love to see. We love a healthy relationship. On the other hand, Leo was a bit of an interesting character to follow because he was trying to be in denial about his attraction towards Ferry. Being attracted to men is relatively new to him, so he's a little bit thrown off by just how possessive. All right, apologies, my phone ran out of storage. Hopefully that doesn't happen again during this video. But as I was saying, Leo finds himself very jealous and possessive of Ferry, and it was just really funny to kind of try and watch him make excuses for why he was feeling this way when in reality it was just very obvious that he couldn't help but be drawn to this man that he has had a connection to for hundreds of lifetimes. I really thought that the story was well done. I thought the world building was interesting. I thought that the dialogue and the banter was well done. I really enjoyed the smut. It had a bit of a found family aspect to it because Ferry had been very isolated while he was the Grim Reaper essentially, and having all these other characters kind of come into his life and help him kind of acclimate to modern living was really entertaining and also very sweet. And I found myself instantly hooked by this author's work. By chapter 1, I knew that this was going to be a story that I enjoyed. I knew that this was going to be a series that I would want to continue, and I knew that this was going to be an author that I was going to continue reading. So I'm really glad that I went ahead and picked this up. This book was actually selected by you guys, my followers, when I did a poll asking you which book I should pick up next, and I had not expected this book to win. And I'm really glad that it did. So thank you guys for your excellent choice. Book number 7 on this list is going to be my top nonfiction of the year, and that is The Transgender Issue by Sean Fay. I am someone who is very invested and passionate about the rights of the trans community, just making sure that I'm fully informed about what they are facing and what we can do about them. So it's no surprise that when this book came up, I was excited to pick it up. Now, this book is written by a trans author who lives in Britain, and it focuses primarily on the issues that the trans community is experiencing within Britain. However, there is unfortunately a lot of similarities between their experiences and the experiences of the trans community here in America. So I found a lot of relatable and important information in the story that will hopefully help me help other people understand the importance of protecting the trans community. This book very much is looking at a lot of the arguments against the trans community. This book isn't like a memoir or biography that's really going to explain to you what it's like to be trans, like what is it like to go through gender affirming care, anything like that. It is letting you know what the trans community is facing, why they are facing it, trying to undo some of the misinformation, and also give you ways to help the trans community, saying this is what the trans community needs in order to stop suffering so much. It can be a very difficult book to read because this community is unfortunately suffering a lot, and so there are a lot of hardships that are being discussed within this story. What I really liked about this book, and I wish it wasn't necessary, but it does it, where it lets you know that helping the trans community in these specific ways also helps society as a whole. There are a lot of issues that the trans community is facing: access to healthcare, access to housing, that are issues that multiple groups in society are facing. And by helping the trans community with these issues, you are helping society as a whole. So it's kind of giving those arguments in a, well, even if you don't want to help the trans community because you suck, there are still benefits to these changes. This book also focuses a bit on intersectionality. I always enjoy when my books do that. This is a book written by a white trans woman, and the author acknowledges the fact that they hold a privilege due to the fact that they are white, and also the fact that they were within a family that allowed them to transition. So I always like when an author points out their own privilege compared to other people within the community, because no matter if you are part of a minority group, there may be certain aspects of your life that give you more privilege than other people within the community, and I always think that's really important to address. So I appreciate the author for doing that. Overall, I thought it was just a very educational story that knew what it wanted to achieve, and it didn't have a lot of excess fat or anything to it. So I think if you're looking for a nice, concise book that is talking about the trans issues, then this is definitely a book that is worth picking up, and I just can't recommend it enough. Book number 6 on this list is going to be Dark Air by C.S. Pacat. This is the sequel to Dark Rise. It is a young adult fantasy story that does not have book 3 out yet and does not have a release date for book 3, which is tragic. However, I absolutely adore C.S. Pacat as an author. I think that they are incredibly talented when it comes to world building and complex character relationships and just creating complex characters in general. This is a fantasy story that is set in historical London. It has kind of that classic history repeats itself vibe to it. Essentially, there was a war thousands of years ago, so long ago that most of humanity does not remember that it happened. And this war was between light and dark. And at the beginning of this book, we are following our main character, Will, who is on the run from a group of people that are looking to raise the Dark King again. At the end of the war, the king essentially was defeated. However, he let people know he set something in place that one day he could return. And this series is kind of following the events that are leading up to his return. So things are escalating, danger is imminent, war is going to happen, and our character finds himself in the care of the stewards, who are actually the descendants of the protectors of the light, and they have been preparing for generations for the rise of the Dark King. Obviously, they are hoping to take preemptive measures to prevent his rise in the first place, but they also acknowledge that he might rise and they need every bit of help that they can get. And so they're hoping to train Will because they think that he is a descendant of the lady, and the lady is the leader of the light party essentially. And she was the one who had killed the king so many generations ago, and so they're hoping to train him to do this. He has also brought his friend Violet along with them. She is actually a member of a family who is looking to raise the Dark King again. However, she was not aware of what they were doing, and when she finds out, she ends up partnering up with Will and kind of training as a bit of a guard, of a warrior, so that she can stand by his side. I absolutely adore Will and Violet's relationship. These are two people who didn't have the best relationships with their biological family, and the two of them are like instant siblings. They are very close, very protective of each other, and I absolutely adore their dynamic. On top of that, we are watching as they are meeting other characters, some of them enemies, some of them allies, and some of them starting off as enemies and potentially becoming allies as the pieces on the chessboard are constantly moving. This second book really kind of blows the world up from the first book. The first book, we are very much located in the hall, which is where the stewards have been hiding and training. And in this book, our characters find themselves a little bit scattered. At first, I was a little upset that some of our characters weren't together anymore, but as I was watching them kind of learn more about the world and their powers, I realized how important it was for them to be separated so that we could get this vaster view of what is happening, of this kind of threat that is so much greater than they potentially ever knew that it was. Like I said, love the world building in this. We got a lot more flashbacks to that initial war. We had some people called Reborns who are essentially people who actively took part in this war many years ago and have been reborn now that it is time for that war to continue, and seeing their perspectives and just getting to learn more about that world through them was so fascinating. I love this series. You can just tell the amount of time that the author took in researching everything that built this world and just the amount of time she put into the details. I am so excited for the third book. This second book ended in a way that really kind of broke my heart and left me a little bit distraught. So I am hoping that in book 3, the author kind of brings everything together. I have a feeling that it's just going to be a very intense, fast-paced book. The first book was a little bit slower. This one definitely sped up. I have a feeling that this is one of those series where the pace is just going to keep going up and up, and I just can't wait to see where we end up. So even if you're someone who is like, I don't know if I want to read YA anymore, I definitely think that you should check this book out. I would say that concept wise and just how complex the world building is, it's probably a really good place for someone who's looking to get into higher fantasy to go ahead and start out, because I am no fantasy expert, but I know that this book really kind of exercises my brain a little bit when it comes to that fantasy muscle. Book number 5 is actually going to be another young adult fantasy, and that is going to be The Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas. This is the first book in a duology. I did read both books in this duology and love the series as a whole, but I did like the first book just a smidge more, so that is why I am putting this one on the list. And in this book, we are following Tio, and Tio is the son of a jade god. And essentially in this world, there are 3 groups of people. There are the jade gods, the gold gods, and the humans. The gold gods kind of hold the most prestigious position. Their children are the strongest. They have the most useful, some people would argue useful powers, and they're almost treated a little bit like superheroes. On the other hand, we have the jade gods, who are a little bit on the weaker side. Some would argue in Tio's case, he is the sole child of the goddess of birds, hence why he has these stunning wings. And he is someone who isn't very happy with the current system, the way that it's set up. And he especially has issues with the Sunbearer Trials. The Sunbearer Trials are something that happen every 10 years. Essentially, long ago, there was another group of gods known as the Obsidians. However, they had little to no respect for the humans and wanted to subjugate them. They were very cruel and violent. And so the sun god ended up sacrificing their body to imprison these obsidian gods. And that created the soul stones, SOL. As in sun, not soul like the human soul. And in order to replenish these stones, one of the children of the gods needs to be sacrificed every 10 years. And so they hold these trials where 10 or 12 kids, I want to say 12 of the kids of the gods are selected. They battle in these trials, and whichever one is ranked the highest ends up becoming the sun bearer for the next 10 years, which is a very prestigious position, but the one with the lowest amount of points ends up being sacrificed. And our character has always been against this. He's like, that's really messed up that we're sacrificing kids here, being their kids. However, usually it is only the children of the gold gods that is selected. And Tio actually is best friends with Naya, who is a gold god, and he is very concerned about the fact that she is definitely going to be selected for this trial. What he doesn't expect is that for the first time in a very long time, 2 children of jade gods are selected as well, including him and young 13-year-old Sio, who is the son of the god of bad luck. And bad luck does he have indeed. And Tio, our character, Sio, the other character, the young character, they have very similar names. Tio ends up taking Sio under his wing, quite literally, because he feels that it's up to him to protect him from losing this competition and being sacrificed. And so the trials begin. If you like a book with trial elements, this book definitely has it. On top of that, we're not just watching like regular people competing in these trials. We are watching the children of gods who have very cool and unique powers, which I think adds an extra interesting element to these trials. These are also trials that are put on by their parents within their cities, and so we're watching them travel to the different cities of the gods and just seeing the differences between those cities and kind of the trials that they put in place for the kids. It was really fascinating world building. It was very bright and colorful, and you could very much see how much inspiration the author took from Mexican culture while writing this book. Everything really just lifted right off of the page, including the food, because there was a lot of mentions of food. This book will make you hungry. But one of the main things I've really adored about this story is the characters and the relationship that Tio starts to create, not just with Theo and his best friend, but with some of the other contestants, and the way they kind of start to open their eyes to things maybe not being the way that they should be. This is definitely a story that is talking about questioning power structures. Even if you are benefiting from those power structures, it's important to kind of view them critically and acknowledge when change needs to occur. It also addresses the fact that even if someone is in a way benefiting from power structures that are in place, that doesn't always mean that their life is great. There are definitely characters in here where the current system, despite them being golds and part of prominent families, are definitely very unhappy and unsatisfied with their life. So I think that it took a very complex look at that issue. On top of that, this book also has a queer normative world, which we always love. Our main character is a young trans man, and that was really well addressed in this book, especially in the beginning. Our character was suffering a little bit from the fact that they had wings, and because they were born biologically female, they had the wings of a female bird, and so they really struggled with a little bit of body dysmorphia that was addressed throughout the story because of that. And I think it was really interesting for the author to use, you know, the different colors of wings that male and female birds have to tackle that issue. So I think that this was a very creative story, and it was a lot of fun. Loved all the characters, loved all the themes, and definitely will be checking out more work by Aiden Thomas. I know that they have the sequel to Cemetery Boys, which was another book I really enjoyed coming out this year, and I am just so excited to check it out. Book number 4 on this list is gonna be Icarus by Kay Enkrum. This is a book that I had the opportunity to buddy read with my friend, and boy am I glad I buddy read this, because I was just gushing about this book, and it was wonderful to have someone to talk about it with. This is a contemporary young adult story, and in this book we are following Icarus, and he is the son of a man who repairs very famous museum-worthy paintings. However, he also uses that talent to forge paintings, specifically to forge paintings that a specific man owns. And then Icarus goes into this man's home, steals the original, and replaces it with the forgery. And this is something that he and his father have been doing for years. His father holds a lot of resentment towards this man, and this is how he decided to address that resentment. And Icarus has not really had any option but to go along with it. He is someone who has had to make a lot of sacrifices in his life because of the way that he and his father live. He's not able to get close to any of his classmates. He can't really have friends. He can't have romantic relationships. He is someone who has to take on a lot more responsibilities as a young man. I think he's 17, 18 in this book, and he has to take on a lot of responsibilities because his father is someone who's not fully mentally there, because he's so invested in his revenge against this man. And at the beginning of this book, as our character is looking to steal a painting and replace it, he stumbles across someone who's not supposed to be in this man's home. No one but this man is supposed to live here. However, there is Helio, and Helio is actually the son of this man, and he has gotten into some trouble, and so his father has decided to lock him away in his home as punishment. And Helio tells Icarus, hey, I'll make you a deal. I won't tell anyone that you're stealing art from my father if you come back and hang out with me, because I'm stuck here all alone and I really could use some company. And so we kind of watch Icarus's life kind of unravel a little bit of what it was. Is this unraveling a bad thing? Not really, because finally Icarus is feeling a little bit of freedom from the stifling life that his father has forced him into, and he and Icarus are continuously growing closer and closer. This is borderline romance. It's not exactly what you would expect if I said this is a romance story, but there is a very strong relationship in the story that leans towards romantic. You are watching the two of them as they are, in a way, falling in love with each other. On top of that, we are watching Icarus as he is struggling to kind of keep distance from the people at his school. There are people that he tries to interact with but keeps at arm's length, and there's some of them that are just not letting that happen. He is the kind of character that just draws you in, and a lot of the people at his school are like, hey, why are you keeping us at arm's length? We want to get to know you. And he's kind of this person who has been trying to be invisible his whole life, and for the first time, so many people are really starting to see him for the first time, and so he's starting to see himself as well. And it's just so beautiful, this story, just watching this young man just come to life for the first time and kind of start to make his own path and to put himself first instead of his father's revenge, to not stay quiet anymore and to really stand up for himself against his father. And I thought Kate Ankrum's writing was stunning. It was such a beautiful writing, the way that she wrote this character, the fact that he was like a teenager technically. I was like, I wish teenagers acted like this. I feel like high school teachers would have a much easier life if teenagers acted like this. I mean, he was this old soul inside of this teenage body. He was a poet. He was a thief. He was so many things. He was such a complex character. And I just loved watching him kind of walk this line throughout the book of being the man that his father wants him to be and becoming the man that he wants to be. And Helios was this really great catalyst for all of it. If you want some intersex representation, Helio is actually an intersex character, which I don't think I've ever read before. I do believe Kate Ankrum is intersex. I don't quote me on that, but I'm like 90% sure that she is. So it is some own voices representation there, and I'm glad that she went ahead and put this in the story. Helios is a dancer. That is his passion, and I just feel like watching someone who values movement so much trapped in this house was really interesting, and watching his instant adoration of Icarus just come to life on the page was so well done. I will definitely be reading Kate Ankrum again. Clearly, this woman knows how to write a book. This book throughout the year has really stuck with me, and so it's no surprise that it was here in my top books of the year at number 4. All right, guys, now we are getting into the top 3 books of this video. These are the books where, yes, I feel very confident in their placement here. So book number 3 is going to be Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews. I fell in love with C.G. Drews' writing this year. Their poetic, dark, grotesque, beautiful writing is exactly what I want to see in a dark horror. This is YA as well. The majority of my top books are YA. I don't know what it is, but they were just slapping this year, let me tell you that. This is a story following Andrew. And Andrew attends this private high school with his twin sister, as well as their best friend Thomas. Thomas, who he deeply adores. And at the beginning of this year, there's something a little bit different. His sister is acting more distant, and Thomas is acting weird as well. And one night, Andrew ends up following Thomas into the woods where students are not supposed to go, and he finds him fighting monsters. Now, these monsters are coming alive from the drawings that Thomas makes, and Thomas is drawing creatures that Andrew is creating through his dark fantasies. And so these monsters are seeking to harm what Thomas loves, and that does include Andrew. So Andrew decides to help Thomas with these monsters, and so the two of them are going out every night and trying to fight them off and protect the rest of the students in the school, but it is a losing battle. If there is one thing that C.G. Drews can really write, it is this oppressive, suffocating feeling of something encroaching onto a space that you're trying to keep it out of and you can't. So throughout both this book as well as Hazelthorne, which I read, you are getting these vibes of nature, because this is nature horror, invading these spaces, yet at the same time it doesn't 100% feel as much as an invasion as it feels like a reclaiming. And it doesn't just stop at the buildings, it goes into the human body, where we are seeing nature growing into people and changing them physically. And it is such a beautifully yet disgustingly written concept that C.G. Drew's writing just perfectly encompasses, and I absolutely adore the way that they write nature horror. It is done really well. Another thing that I absolutely adored about this story is Andrew, to me, was a very relatable character. He is asexual. He also has anxiety. These are two things, two A's that I have. I have I have anxiety and I am also asexual, and I thought that the representation for both was done really well, and it was something that I could really grasp onto and made me love this character all the same. Now, what really brought the story to a top book of the year is the way that C.G. Drew writes relationships. Again, just like with Icarus, I wouldn't call this a romance story. However, we have a very strong bond between two characters that is clearly built out of adoration and love for each other, that is leaning romantic. And in this book, this crosses the line a little bit into obsession. Thomas and Andrew, their obsessive kind of codependent relationship is so addictive to read about. Every interaction these two have, every thought that Andrew has about Thomas is so intense that you can't help but just like plow through the story in hopes that they will share just a kiss, a touch. You will take anything for these characters to be together, because the author's writing just created this need within you for the two of them to be together. And that was really what took the story to the next level. These characters need to be together no matter what the cost is. This book was dark and beautiful and heartbreaking, and I absolutely loved every single moment of it. And I know I'm not alone. So many people love this story. It is so worth the hype, and it is definitely deserving of one of the top 3 spaces on my 2025 best books list. All right, so book number 2 is actually going to be a duology. So I'm going to hold up 2 books here, and that is going to be Pretty and Together by Keith F. Miller Jr. If you have heard me talk about these books on my series this year, you should not be surprised to see this on my top list or even in the top 3. This series has my heart and soul. I am obsessed with these books a little bit, and I want literally everyone to read this. Like, I would recommend this book to everyone, even more so than the book that made the #1 spot on this list. These are the books that I want everyone to pick up. Again, young adult, They were just doing it. Young adults, Keelian male romances were just popping off this year. I don't know what to say. This is a contemporary story where we are following two young Black men. We have Jay, who's in the blue shirt, and Leroy, who is in the white tank top, or is that called a wife beater if it's for men? I don't really know. Either way, those are the two characters that we are primarily following throughout the story. Here in the green striped shirt is Will, who is a character that makes an appearance in this book but becomes a point of view here in the second book. This book is the kind of book that you want all young men to pick up. This is the kind of book that is addressing so many different aspects of toxic masculinity that you just hope that it falls into the right hands and completely changes their life for the better. In this book, we are following Jay, and he is approached by Leroy at the beginning of this book, and Leroy asks him if he would like to go out with him, and Jay is quite surprised by this. He didn't expect that. Leroy is rather popular. He's very good looking, and Jay is a little bit insecure throughout this series because he is so dark skinned and there is a lot of colorism, unfortunately, even within the Black community. However, he agrees to go out with Leroy, and the two of them start to form this friendship and romantic relationship, which is unfortunately interrupted when an outside force starts attacking the Black Diamonds. And the Black Diamonds are a organization within their community that is there to protect the community and to bring peace between the different gangs that are in that area. And Leroy's family, specifically his aunt and older brother, actually are the leaders of this organization, and so obviously a threat to this organization is a threat to Leroy and his family, and so he kind of needs to push Jay away for Jay's protection because he doesn't want him to get involved in this, but also because he needs to focus on protecting the Black Diamonds as well as his family. This is a book that deals a lot with racism. It deals a lot with gentrification and the extremes that wealthy people will go to overtake a community. It shows the importance of community and staying strong and connected and supporting your neighbors. This book also deals a lot with addressing like homophobia. Obviously, we have some young Black men who are queer, and that is something that is unfortunately looked down upon. And luckily, within this book, it's not as big of an issue because they have really created this safe space for themselves. The friends and the families are really supportive of their lifestyle. There are multiple queer characters throughout this, which is wonderful. I do believe that Leroy's aunt is actually a trans woman, so that was really great to see that representation in here. Like I said, toxic masculinity is addressed in here in multiple ways, not just in the way that it normalizes queerness and queer relationships, but also in the way that the relationships between Jay and Leroy and their older brothers was presented. Both of them have older brothers, and just watching the close relationship that they had with their brothers, the way that they felt comfortable showing physical affection to their brothers, the way that their brothers lived their life to be a positive influence on their younger siblings. They felt so comfortable expressing their love for each other was just incredible. The same goes with platonic relationships, the friendships that our characters have with other boys throughout this series, even if they aren't romantic, the way that they feel that they can comfortably tell them that they love them, the things they love about them, the way that they feel that they can hug them in public and, you know, touch them, giving a slap on the back or holding their hand or things like that, and not feeling ashamed to do that was just so wonderful to see. I feel like especially nowadays we see so much toxic masculinity going around. We see so many men falling down that rabbit hole of, you know, the red pill culture and all that, and just seeing these books was honestly like a breath of fresh air. I loved every relationship that was within the story. They were complex and well fought for, and especially in the second book, I feel like we get some more complex relationships with people who have made mistakes, and they are having to come to terms with those mistakes and apologize for them and take action in such a way that shows that they meant their apology, that they meant what they said when they said they weren't going to do that again. They were going to learn from their lesson. They weren't going to repeat their mistakes. And I think that this book could be a really great template to young people when it comes to taking responsibilities for your mistakes. So these books, I honestly feel, should be in every high school, that there is so much that people could learn from these books, and that these books could speak to so many people on so many levels. And I just want to keep hollering from the top of the hill that people should read these books, because these relationships are just 10 out of 10. These characters are just gonna take a hold of your heart and they're not gonna let go. You're gonna love every character in this book, and you're gonna want them to be happy, and you're gonna want them to be strong and brave, and you're gonna want it to all be worth it. And I love them. I love them all so much, and they definitely are well deserving of the second spot here on my best books of the year. So please consider picking these up. All right, guys, it is time to talk about my best book of the year, and you're probably wondering, what could it be? What could the best book of the year be? Well, she's been sitting in the background looking pretty this whole time, and that is going to be American Rapture by CJ Lead. This was a religious horror book that I picked up during a vlog this year. This was a book that I went back and forth on before I purchased it, because I was like, I'm either gonna love this book or I'm gonna DNF it. There's no way that I'm gonna feel middle of the road about this book. And boy, was I right, and boy, am I glad that we went towards the positive. I cannot stop thinking about this book. Every time I look at this book, I was like, she did that. CJ Lead went and did that, and I am so glad that she did. I feel like this just hit so many important topics to me as a woman, and as a woman living in current day America, that I just couldn't help but just latch on to this book and kind of use it as like a summary of what I feel. Like, obviously it doesn't tackle every issue that America is facing, but it tackles some pretty big ones. So in this book, we are following Sophie, and she is a young 16, 17-year-old girl who is growing up in a rather religious community, and an even more so religious and Puritan household. And she is someone who struggles a lot with her religious beliefs. She is someone who does believe in God, and certain aspects of religion appeal to her, but there are also a lot of aspects that just don't align with her experiences and her personal feelings. One of them being that about 5 years before the start of this book, her brother was taken from her due to the fact that her parents found out that he was queer, and he was sent to a facility for troubled children, and she has never forgiven her parents for that, because she does not agree that there's anything wrong with her brother. She does not think there's anything wrong with the queer community, and she is also really struggling with being the sole focus of her parents' like religious fanaticism, I guess you could say. She, as a 16-17-year-old girl, obviously is having a lot of changes. She is changing physically and is aware of the way that people are responding to those changes. She herself is becoming a little bit more aware of her interest in romantic and maybe even sexual relationships. And as someone who lives in a very puritanical household, there is a lot of shame that comes with that. However, at the beginning of this book, her life is kind of turned upside down when a plague breaks out, and the primary kind of symptom of this plague is that people become incredibly lustful. I just want to go ahead and say that there isn't a lot of sexual violence on page. In fact, I would go so far to say there isn't really any like full blown rape that is occurring. I think that if the author had been explicit in that aspect, this book would not have worked for me. However, I think that it was handled in such a way where it was very clear what was happening. It was very clear how dangerous, scary, disgusting what was happening is without being overly grotesque. It wasn't like trauma porn or anything along those lines, so I really appreciated that. When this plague breaks out, our character finds herself away from her community, away from her family, on her own for the first time ever, and she's kind of gonna have to go ahead and survive this situation. And she decides the best thing for her to do is to find her brother and to head towards this facility that he is at. She, throughout her journey, is meeting some people that are joining her on this journey, specifically a police officer that she meets at the beginning who informs her that where she wants to go, she can't go that. It's a quarantine zone. There's no way for her to get in there. And so the two of them are kind of trying to find a safe place where they can stay to wait all of this out. This book, when it comes to the people that she meets, I feel like there is a purpose for every person that is introduced to our character's life. There is a lesson that every one of these side characters can teach her. Each one of these side characters is somehow contributing to the personal growth that she is experiencing. I really love stories that have a religious aspect to them, where the author is very clearly addressing the issues that come with religion, and we are following a character who has been a part of religion for a very long time but is starting to reshape their relationship with God and church and everything along that, who are really looking inside themselves but also looking out at the world and the people around them and the people that they have come to care for and respect, and are starting to skew their beliefs in such a way that align a little bit better with reality, I guess you could say. And that is something that our character is doing throughout here, and I always love reading about that. This book very much is comparing the spread of religious extremism to the spread of a plague. Quite blatantly, that is what the author is doing, and I appreciate that messaging because I agree with it. Obviously, if you don't agree with it, you might be put off by this book a little bit, but I feel like the author was speaking a very deep and disturbing truth when she was talking about this group of religious extremists that were kind of growing and spreading throughout the country side by side with this plague, and I think it was really well done. On top of that, one of the biggest things that I felt like this book did and that I as a woman really appreciated was the discussion of sexual violence. In the beginning of this book, we are following this woman who is, well, just starting to become a woman, and people are becoming more aware of her body, and that fills her with a lot of shame and also a lot of fear. She is very quickly told by her mother that it is up to her to dress modestly to protect herself. Very quickly, she is told that she is in danger of sexual violence just by existing. And that is what everyone in this book is facing because of this pandemic. Suddenly, not just women are at threat of sexual violence. Obviously, that's never the case. Men are at threat of sexual violence as well, but it is definitely more common for women to have to face it. And I think that the author does a really great job of just kind of bringing that fear to life in a very extreme and disturbing way. And so I really appreciated the commentary on this is what it's like to be a woman and to have these fears of being attacked and sexually violated every single day of your life. And I think this was a big slap in the face. And part of me hopes that there are some people that pick this up and get that slap, and that slap acts as a bit of a wake-up call for them. On top of just the themes and the characters and our character growth throughout the story, I think that I had a really great pacing, that there were a lot of high intense moments that were interspaced with these slower, more reflective moments. So I think the pacing was really well done. This is the kind of book that emotionally broke me. I was crying when I initially reviewed this book in the vlog. If you want to go ahead and check that out, I will go ahead and link that up above. It was a emotional sucker punch of a story. The author did not hold back with the horror aspect of this book, and while she gave us a hopeful ending, it wasn't exactly a happy ending, which I think is very reflective of what we're going through right now. We're kind of right here in the midst of a very terrible time in history. I think personally, socially, our country has been disintegrating year after year. And while I think it's important that the author puts a aspect of hope into the story, I think that it holds so much more relevance that it doesn't have this happy ending, that it's like, hey, we're still very much in the thick of it. So far, we've survived, but we got to keep going. We still have a lot of hardship ahead of us. So overall, the messaging of the story really hits home. And I think that's really what makes this the best book of the year. I think that maybe it wouldn't have hit as hard if I had read it in another year, but I feel like the year that 2025 was, this book was like, hello, I am the book for 2025 and you are going to get so much out of me. And I really did. So I absolutely, oh, my cat just ran by. So I absolutely love this book, and am just so thankful that I went ahead and picked this up, because sometimes it is just so wonderful to see so many of your thoughts and fears just reflected in a story. And that is what this book really gave me. It gave me a way to really just like verbalize a lot of the fears that I was having this year. So I have a great appreciation and a great love for this book. All right, guys, my throat is about to give out on me because I have been talking about these wonderful books for a little bit over an hour now. I would love to know if you have read any of these books and if you love them as much as I did, or did I convince you to put them on your TBR? Hopefully that is my intention, to get more people to read these wonderful stories. I would love to know some of your top books of the year. I'm always looking for great books to add to my never-ending TBR. As always, guys, thank you so much for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!